Beecraft Live. Firstly, some apologies. We've had quite a number of technical issues over the last couple of weeks with some of the software we use for these events, which fingers crossed is all resolved. So you may notice a slightly different layout now as we've switched software providers. Tonight, it's our belated Asian Hornet special, and we're joined by a great panel of experts tonight from UK, Jersey, all over. And as normal, if you're watching through YouTube or the Beecraft website, you can ask questions live to the panel. Just get those questions coming in. So we've had a number of questions already, actually. So we'll jump straight into the introductions first of all. We've got quite a number of new faces. So John, do you want to go first? You're first on the list, on the top row.
Okay, my name is John DeCartret. I'm the Vice President of the Jersey Beekeepers down here in Jersey, or Asian Hornet Central, as some people call it. I'm also one of the founder members of the Jersey Asian Hornet Group, and I've had precautions on my hives since 2014, and I've been heavily involved in the fight against the hornets here for the last 3 years. Some of you, or a few of you, will have seen my social media postings that I try and attend all the nests and record them both in images and video, which I hope you all find very helpful.
Lovely, thank you. Sarah and Simon, you're combined tonight, so who wants to go first?
Yeah, so my name is Sarah Bunker. I went out to Jersey last summer and helped a little bit with some tracking over there, but came back to the UK thinking, good grief, we really need to get our fingers out as far as Asian hornets go. We need to be able to track them if we need to. We need to know more about the biology. So I ended up writing a book. Do the plug now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Asian Hornet Handbook, available from my website, which I'll put up later on the screen. And I trained as a biologist myself, and this was a lovely sweet spot for me. I'm a beekeeper, I love insects, I'm an illustrator, and I do layout and design work, so it just beautifully came together in writing the book, which was a very intense 6 months, but very enjoyable.
Lovely, thank you. And Simon, go on, over to you.
So I'm Simon O'Sullivan. I'm a Devon beekeeper. I'm the chairman of Oakhampton Beekeepers, and that means I'm on the team for the executive council for the Devon beekeepers. And I have taken on the role and given the role of organising the branches AHATs. I was in Jersey last year when Sarah Bunker was there and Jerry, and found it an invaluable experience, really. We learned an awful lot from you guys in Jersey. And just seeing the insect for the first time alive rather than the photograph makes such a difference. So that's me.
Lovely. Alistair, yourself?
Yes, evening everyone. My name is Alistair Christie and I am the Asian Hornet Coordinator employed by the States of Jersey. So down in Jersey here. I've kept bees for 18 years, appalling beekeeper, but never mind. Not much involved in Asian Hornets prior to this year, but yeah, they drew straws and I drew the very, very short one and ended up with this role. So so I'm responsible for kind of coordinating all the reports in Jersey, feeding the information out to our volunteers, assisting them where I can in the tracking process, but also once nests are found, doing things like arranging their destruction and the funding of the destructions as well, and liaising with other authorities, bit in France, but the UK, the other islands as well, and kind of sharing experiences and trying to learn what we can.
Brilliant, thank you. And last but not least, Jerry.
Yes, thank you, Rudy. I'm Jerry Stewart. I'm a beekeeper for Torbay branch, Cockington Apiary, and I'm the press officer for Devon AHAT. So good evening to you all.
Lovely, thank you. Right, we'll jump straight in then. It's quite exciting because I know Alistair's got something to show us. So we'll start off with an introductory question, really. What exactly is the Asian Hornet, and is it really a threat to UK beekeeping? you like to have a go with that, Alistair? And you can
Go on,
perhaps
see, right, you're on stage, Hornet.
demonstrate.
Well, just I think it's in an old I don't know, it might be in an old oh, let's see. Just stay still if you can. If I can get the back of it, it might be a bit better. It's sort of running for the shadow of the lid of the bottle. It's not very happy, tell you that. Oh dear, just go. I want to see the back of it, and I think everyone else would appreciate that a little bit better.
Seems quite small, much smaller than I thought it would be, actually.
This is a small one. Yeah, I mean, looking at it, I'd say this is about just over 2 centimeters long. At the moment, we're getting them that are much closer to about 3 centimeters in size. Yeah. Early Hornets in the season certainly might be about this sort of size, but as the season goes on, they get some of them get a lot larger.
Lovely. So what exactly is the Asian hornet? Is it a threat to beekeepers in the UK and wider as well in France? I know Kevin, who's a regular on you, obviously he tells us the issues he experiences with Asian hornets.
What I would say is that the terminology Asian hornet, I mean, I don't mind it, but it's a terminology that's bandied around the world in different areas. The recent hornet destruction they did in Canada was a completely different species to what we're dealing with here, but it still gets called the Asian hornet. So it's kind of all right in kind of common parlance, I think. But anyway, to give it its Latin name, it is Vespa velutina nigrithorax, so black thorax. And I think you know, if you're writing serious articles about the hornet, you should put the name in where you go. Yeah, so there are a good number of Asian hornets in Asia, most of them, I suppose, but a few of them making their way to Europe and other parts of the world. So the Canadian problem was that Vespa mandrina. Yeah. And there is another one. Is it Vespa orientalis that's coming up through Greece at the moment?
Yes, that is an existing species that's in southern Europe.
Oh, the orientalis, is it? Okay. No, I thought, based on the orientalis pit, it might have been an invasive species rather than already there.
It's thought it arrived in France in about 2004 in a cargo of pottery pots that were destined for a bonsai nursery. That was posted to Bordeaux, and for maybe 3 or 4 years, people didn't really realise what they were dealing with. But now they've spread throughout the whole of France, into northern Italy, down to Spain, Portugal, Belgium, into the Netherlands, and into Germany. And as of this year, they reckon they have about 100,000 nests in France. So it's extraordinarily fast, the spread. They've been moving through France at a rate of about 78 kilometers a year, which is a mixture of the queens migrating at the beginning of the season and accidental transport by humans.
Really?
Around about this, sorry, are you going to say something?
Sorry. Yes, I would say it is a threat to our bees, to our honeybees, and it's something that beekeepers need to be prepared for. In terms of colony losses, I suspect Funk probably has more figures than I have off the top of my head. But we also need to get across to the public the importance of protecting our other insects, because it doesn't just predate on honeybees. It predates on all our pollinating or flying insects, and it's not just a beekeeping issue. It's something that needs to be put out to the rest of society, really. But it's an environmental issue.
Yeah, it's a threat to honeybees as well as wasps, butterflies. You're going to see your butterflies disappear, your hoverflies. It's a threat to all pollinators, not just honeybees.
That's something I didn't realize. I honestly thought it was purely honeybees.
No.
We do a lot of talks in Devon to the public, and once we start telling them that your butterflies are going to be disappearing, they go, wow. And it's a real impact factor for them that all these pollinators will start to disappear. There's places in northern China in which they employ people with bamboo canes and chicken feathers to pollinate fruit trees and fruit bushes. And we've got to get it over to the public that we don't want that to happen within Europe or the UK or in fact Jersey.
As far as attacking beehives, we see that all the time here on an almost daily basis. There were 10 apiaries attacked last year. We got the situation where one gentleman whose 7 hives were under very severe attack, and he said he was quite accepting that he was going to lose the hives. As it was, the nest was found and destroyed. But he would have been the first person who would have basically given up beekeeping because of these hornets. I've got them here at my hives. They're maybe 100 meters from where I'm sitting at the moment. I had hornets yesterday from the nest that was found early this morning, and I've got another 7 later on today, and I'm sure there'll be more tonight or in the morning when I go and look. They are hawking on a lot of hives, and what people have to accept is they're not they don't need to go inside the hives. If you read the reports from Europe, it only takes 3 or 4 hornets to be hawking outside the hive, and a perfectly healthy hive, the bees won't come out to forage. They'll know there's a predator that they can't deal with outside, and the quite healthy colony won't come out. And at this time of the year, when they're taking the winter bees, potentially, it'll weaken the colony enough that it won't survive through the winter. So there's a wider issue, but also one of the research issues that's being looked at the moment. And we had a team from AFA over recently, and they were using butterfly nets to catch the hornets as they returned to the nest with their prey, trying to do a study on the prey species that we've seen. And for people who've seen or studied the videos that I produce and post, you can see them bringing back huge numbers of prey items. Obviously, it's impossible at that stage to see what they are, but there is obviously research being undertaken to identify what that prey is. But yes, they can take spiders, butterflies, all species of bees. They are particularly, we had lots of reports last year of them taking very large bumblebees, considerably larger than themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were quite surprised, and they reported them to us because of that. And you'd see quite a slow moving bumblebee flying along, and suddenly this black hornet would come down and take it out of the air. And I've actually videoed them going over to a bush and decapitating a wasp and taking the legs. They just want the thorax, they just want the muscle pack, and taking that back. And a hornet's nest that has hundreds, if not thousands, of larvae, all protein eating. This is the time of year when our natural pollinators are dying down. It's now that the hornets tend to be turning more to beehives.
Yeah.
And we should all be aware of that, and the public need to be aware of that as well.
Can you see that? That's hawking. Has that come out?
Let's see if I can.
Where was that taken?
This is on from the NBU website.
But the hive is where?
Offhand, I don't know. I don't know whether it's from Jersey, but you can see the hornet at the bottom.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. In terms of colony numbers and losses, I mean, I did. There's a recent article from Portugal about a beekeeper who had 300 hives, and he's lost 200 of them at a cost of, I think, was quoted as being 80,000 euros. That might be an extreme situation, I don't know, but there will be a commercial knock-on to the presence of Asian hornets in our environment, with beekeepers, with other pollinated plants. There will be, and it's difficult to sort of quantify it all, I think, but it's important in the message, I feel, that to make it clear that it's not just a beekeeping or a honeybee issue. It has a much broader effect on our native ecology. Measuring that, I think, is a lot more difficult, but there's no doubt it does have a much broader effect on our native ecology.
Yeah,
So in terms of
generalist insects, so they're not designed to attack honeybees in particular, but the honeybees in their hives are particularly easy food in some ways. So they're attacking lots of native insects, but honeybees unfortunately are good for them.
Yeah.
So, in terms of the situation in Jersey and the UK, where are we at this year then? Perhaps you could give us an overview of the difference. What sort of sightings have we had in 2019 so far in the UK?
In the UK, hang on, sort of looking down. So, 9th of September, Ashford, Kent, a single Hornet captured. Then on the 2nd of September, we had a nest in the Tamworth area.
Working backwards.
I'm going backwards as well.
I think if I recall, it's been 4 in total.
We're looking at four sightings. The last one being just last night.
Yeah.
The first. Yeah, and that was in Christchurch and Dorset. So
on the doorstep. So.
Yeah, it's getting closer to Devon, that's for sure.
Yeah. So what is the situation in Jersey then, in comparison to the UK?
Well, slightly different, one might say. Slightly different. I can't remember when the first sighting was in Jersey, but in total we must have had, I think it's just under 700 reports. So amongst that are all the Asian Hornets, and the total number of Asian Hornet reports is just under 300. So this covers, this is not nests, this covers the flying insects. So earlier on in the season, we had reports of 69 foundress queens. I can't remember when the last one was, but it was probably, I could come back to that in a second, but yeah, 69 foundress queens. So since then, we've had an additional, it's going to be about 220, 230 reports of most likely workers. There might be some drones in there more recently, but most likely workers. On the nest side of things, we had 27 primary nests. Most of them at that sort of early stage of up to the size of a sort of grapefruit, something like that. I think we've had 4 or 5 larger primary nests, mainly in bramble patches, actually, so a bit smaller than the size of a football. The smallest primary nest was the first one we found on the 12th of April, and that was no bigger than a golf ball. Good picture. Yeah, there you go. Probably a little smaller than that. Following on from the primary nests, we are now up to 41 secondary nests. The last 2 of those, number 40 and 41, were found today in different areas of Jersey. Both of them fairly high up in trees. I think they were both sycamore trees, actually. Yeah, both of them in diameter, you're looking between 40 and 50 centimeters, something like that in diameter. Too big to fit in a dustbin. There you go. Yeah, that's the small one. But so that's where we're up to today, and getting daily reports and still tracking hornets and trying to find the nests before it's too late and before the weather closes in. Yeah.
So that is the management process, is it, to track them, identify them?
Management process is receiving the reports, confirming those reports, because we get a lot that just, we get our gold star reports that come with a very nice photograph and details of where it was seen and when it was seen and what it was doing and what direction it flew in. Equally, we get sort of one-line emails and garbled telephone messages of, I think I saw a hornet in my garden on Sunday. And I have to try and pick those apart and try and work out whether there's relevance to those reports, whether they are real, and often, some good conversations with people keen to impart, tell you the story. You can usually work out whether it's a verified Asian hornet or not. After that, the reports are collated, handed on to the volunteers. Depending on the area of Jersey and where I know we've got tracking teams working, and they usually start the process by putting up some traps, and once you started to trap hornets, you can start to mark and track hornets, and it can be a fairly long-winded process. Equally, it can be rather quick. I think John's got the record for finding a nest in Jersey, which was about 20 minutes. One of the ones found today was the tracking process started yesterday and it was found today. So that's pretty quick. Others have taken weeks, not necessarily full time, but others have taken weeks. Yeah.
Can I just come in on that and say we talk about trapping, but we do relatively little trapping now, only in that first instance where we want to confirm that there are hornets at that location. What an innovation that Bob Hogg developed earlier this summer was to have open bait stations called a wick station, which is basically a jar of the attractant with a wick, and the hornets can come and feed on the liquid that's drawn up into the wick, and we found that to be very successful. And also having on the top of that jar another container with actually the neat liquid in that the hornets can come and feed in really quickly, and that way the tracking seems to work better. But little tricks like when the hornets first come, you don't catch it the first time it arrives. You wait, you let it acclimatize or get its situation. It goes off, comes back, and then the second time it'll come in and it will do. The first time it comes in, as it takes off, they often seem to do a three figures of 8 and a couple of circles, and they head off towards the nest. And then when they come back and they get caught and marked and put back on the bait, they then fly straight to the nest. Things like that we've observed and have been absorbed into our methodology here, and some of our trackers are absolutely fantastic. In truth, it's not something that I get too involved in. I'm involved in the social media aspect and the photography and recording, but some of our tracking people are just superb, and they put a lot of hours in, and they do some fantastic work.
Everyone has their own slightly different technique. There are different ways of doing it. The sort of topography, the terrain around the nest area is an influencer on the process you would use. But some are definitely better than others at it. Others are better at sort of managing other people in their team, and also recording the information you learn when you're tracking, getting it down into a mapping system of some sort, so you can look at the tracking lines that you've achieved that day and draw up your battle plan for the following day. I mean, all those are sort of quite important skills in the whole process of finding that nest as quickly as possible. But what we do find is actually when you've narrowed down your tracking area to 4 or 5 trees, it can take a group of you sometimes an hour or so to find the nest. I mean, they're so well hidden sometimes. So good eyesight is a kind of a requirement for being a good tracker. But there are little techniques as well we've done here. They're not that a little bit fiddly perhaps, but we use feathering of hornets occasionally to make them more visible. They're very easy to lose against the sort of foliage of trees and hedges. So if you can glue a fluorescent feather or some fluorescent sort of fly tying wool to a hornet, it makes it visible for far longer, and you can really see it against the sort of canopy of trees in a way that you couldn't beforehand. Yeah, it's an important technique, that one.
Have they ever thought about sort of mini GPS receivers and glue them to the back, or is that too technical?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to have a chap called Peter Kennedy from Exeter University over last year, and in fact I think he's I'm talking to him today about him coming over for various reasons next week. He's created a bit of a sort of radio tracking battle bus, I understand, and he is an expert on attaching radio transmitters to the backs of hornets and tracking them back to the nest. Now, it's not without its problems, not least each radio transmitter costs about £140. They're not cheap bits of equipment. Also, the radio transmitters weigh, I think the heaviest ones we've got here weigh 0.29 of a gram. So you need a pretty beefy hornet to carry that sort of weight, and you don't get those beefy hornets early on in the season. You do get them later on in the season, but the process does involve catching a large hornet. I think they anesthetize it using ice. You then weigh the hornet, and if it's under I think it's 0.85 of a gram, you don't even consider sticking the transmitter to it. Once you've got your Hornet stuck with transmitter to it, I've not actually done that, but there is a way of doing it. You then, I think the technique is to release the Hornet into a flight cage, just to check that it can fly strongly before you bother releasing it. And once you release it, you jolly well hope it goes back to the nest rather than flies up to a convenient branch and has a rest for a few hours. Not without its problems, but I know that the technique is being honed. Yeah. And there are other things I've heard of, such as another university working on what's called a piezo crystal system. I think the crystal is powered by the vibration of the wings. However, the range of such the crystals are significantly lighter than the radio transmitters, but the range is only 20 to 25 meters, and we're a little uncertain of the kind of I think the terminology is the attenuation of the signal if the Hornet flies, behind foliage or even goes into the nest, whether the signal is lost. I think the technique relies on following the Hornet with a drone, and Hornets fly pretty fast. And I'm not quite sure what happens if the Hornet turns a sharp corner and flies through a hedge, whether the drone attempts to follow it with, unfortunate consequences. Anyway, it's being worked.
Technologies develop. It's quite interesting to know that.
Yeah.
There are a couple of techniques that are being used. There's harmonic radar, which involves sticking a kind of metal loop onto the Hornet and letting it go, and then you pick up a reflection of that using a small marine radar. That's being used especially in northern Italy.
It's quite expensive though, isn't it, Sarah?
It's quite expensive. A few £100s for the marine radar. They're not very nice things to work around as well. There's a kind of a human health issue there. And you can only track a certain distance from the radar. So the idea is to put the radar in the center of an apiary and try and find out which direction the insects are heading off from the apiary back to the nest. So yeah, it's a heavy bit of kit to move compared with Peter Kennedy's aerial, where he's tracking radio transmitters, which is a pretty successful method.
It's a transponder that he uses, and the aerial is about 8 to 10 inches long. So it's not only the weight of the actual transponder that the Hornet's got to carry, but it's also the wind factor against that aerial as it flies. And we went to a cemetery in St. Brelads, and we were looking for a Hornet that was absolutely knackered, tired out, because it couldn't manage the weight. So it's not without its problems.
Yeah.
But from what I understand, that there is new technology that I think these guys that are flying the drones, they're hoping to get wing signature recognition. So as the Hornet's wings beat, the drone picks up that signature and then flies to the nest. So that's something to look forward to in the future.
Yeah.
One of the
another method as well, which is radio frequency ID, RFID, where you stick a tiny chip onto an insect, and then you can read that chip as it enters a hive through a tunnel, and that's being used by researchers quite a lot to find out the foraging range for insects. So it's quite a neat technique, and it has its place in research anyway.
Lovely. So, question for you then, Sarah and Jerry, and Simon as well. What skills have you learnt on your excursions to Jersey, which you've brought back to help you moving forward?
Thing, isn't it? It's identification. Like I said before, seeing a Hornet for the first time just makes. Once you've seen one, I don't think you will mistake.
Agree with that.
Never again. No.
Never again. Once you've seen it,
it's practical experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what was needed. It's all very well knowing about where they've come from, the history of the incursion, what they look like. It's not until you actually go ahead and work with the people that are doing it all the time, that you gain that valuable information. So it's essential, isn't it?
Yeah, the handling the hornet, they're really quite gentle creatures, aren't they? And unless you get to that distance, you Jersey guys can tell us how close. Where's the danger point when you approach a nest? But away from the nest, they're really quite handleable. Would you agree?
Well, I'm not about to go and discover where the danger point is,
No.
but primary nests, I've certainly stood within, a foot or two of them, and held my phone up to them. And as long as you don't stand in the flight path, I didn't feel in the slightest bit threatened. They react dramatically to vibrations in the building and things like that. If a nest is inside a wooden shed and you go stomping around in there, they pick that up very quickly indeed. So you have to be mindful of the sort of structure that you're working in. We have had situations. A secondary nest earlier on in the year was actually found in a tree in St Helier. And the tree was being removed by a tree surgeon, and there were a good number of branches on the tree, and they were, let's say, 2/3 of the way up, removing the branches and dropping them down in sort of sections. And it wasn't until the tree surgeon started on the very, very last branch in the top section and cut part the way through the branch that he noticed that there was a nest and a couple of hornets around him. And I think what upset him even more was actually he'd been told that hornets are severely defensive and everything else, and sort of rather alarmed him that weren't sort of greater signals of the presence of the nest. They didn't seem to react the fact that he was climbing the tree, or the vibration of that and the chainsaw and everything else. Equally, at the other end of the scale, we've if you do start sort of using machinery around large nests, we haven't really had a situation of this, I don't think. Particularly, we've had one ground nest this year in Jersey, and somebody did take a flail mower over it, and that upset the nest considerably, and they were stung. But I think in terms of tree-based nests, we know when we're removing the branches and part of what we call the natural removal of nests, they don't like the vibration about them doing that. But you really are very close to it doing that process.
I say last year, I'm talking the primary nest where you've just got the queen to worry about, albeit she is rather a large insect. For those of you who monitor my material, you'll know that I spent a month every day doing a video diary of a nest, and I was using a camera with a macro lens working of no more than 3 inches from the nest entrance.
Yeah.
And I had a baseball cap and a t-shirt on, but I certainly didn't have any other protective equipment on. And she was fully aware that I was there, and I was actually shining a microscope light up into the nest, and that went on for 28 days. So they are quite. I did duck when she flew out, I must admit, or came back, but I felt quite safe at that. And what Alice was saying about the tree surgeon, that goes against the practice that some of our people have tried of when they've known that the nest is in one of a series of 2 or 3 trees, that they've hit the tree with a hammer to see if they could get any reaction, see if the hornets could be seen flying out. So the fact that you've got a tree surgeon who's worked his way up in this tree and not been looked at by these hornets, everything seems to change. I would just say, just going back to the tracking and not going away from electronics a bit, one of the things that is constant, and it was brought home to me again today, and something I posted again today, was one of the nests that was found today is near for those of you who've been to Jersey, near our Howard Davis Park, which is a public park in the east of St Helier, where we've previously found 3 secondary nests there this year. And on August the 10th, I caught and marked 2 hornets there. And from the return time I had, which is 5 minutes in a particular direction, I marked that on a map. When the nest was found today, and I put the nest on, the nest is within 5 degrees and about 40 meters, over 500 meters of that point that I'd located it. It's on. I posted it on the on our Facebook page. So they have been coming along that distance for, well, since August the 10th at the very least. So there's a constant there. They're not just flying in one direction for a few days and then changing it. They've been making that journey for 2 months. It's taken us that long to find the nest, and I say hasten, I didn't find it, but that is the constant of that time and distance discovery that I noticed 2 years ago, where when we were having hornets on bait stations, that if they were allowed to fly away and the time was recorded between when they left the bait station and when they returned, that time in minutes translates to hundreds of meters. So if the hornet was gone for 5 minutes, that would tend to indicate that the nest was about 500 meters away. And that's held good over quite a lot of different terrain over the last 3 years. It's a very basic observation that I made. It's accepted that once the time gets below about a minute and a half, then you're very close to the nest anyway, and it doesn't hold. But from about a kilometre down to about 200 metres, that's pretty well a measurement that you can go by and rely on.
Lovely. Thank you. Well, we've had loads of questions come in, so I suppose we better answer a few. Right. This one is, are you trying to eradicate the hornet or manage the situation? I think we touched upon this slightly earlier. Who would like to go with that one?
Well, our Chief Minister here in Jersey has said that eradication is the aim. I think those of us involved know that that's not going to be possible. Here, because of our unique geographical situation, on an easterly wind, at a closest point, we're only 12 miles from the coast of France, where these insects are endemic now and they're not being controlled. We're always going to be open to more insects flying over. We know that's taken place this year because 2 insects were found on reefs, one to our south and one to our east coast, which are halfway between the coast of France and Jersey.
Yeah.
And also we have car ferry traffic daily to France and back, and we also know that the hornets are very good at tucking themselves away on vehicles and on lorries, etc. So we don't think we're ever going to be able to eradicate them from Jersey. Our aim is to reduce the numbers and manage them to a degree as best we can. Of course, we don't know how successful we've been, in the hope that maybe somebody somewhere is going to come with some sort of scientific solution to the problem.
I think that ties in nicely with another question, actually. Are there any natural predators of the hornet?
I think not particularly, but I think recently there's been an article about honey buzzards in the UK.
I was just going to say, somebody wrote another question actually to say that a nest had been destroyed by a honey buzzard in Portugal. So.
Yes, yeah. I think we John may correct me, but we had honey buzzards in Jersey, but they're migrating, so they don't stop over here for long.
We do see them. I was a bit of a bird watcher until I started watching hornets. They are a very rare summer visitor and an autumn migrant. They are sometimes seen to come over on the thermals in the warm weather in the summer. Bob Hogg, one of our colleagues, has attended 2 reports this year of what are believed to be hornets, but he couldn't say they were honey buzzards, possibly common buzzards, actually excavating nests in banks. And there were 2 cases we've had in the last sort of month or 6 weeks. So we don't know if there's a honey buzzard. I've seen the report from Portugal. I've also seen the comment that, well, that's only nest material found in one nest in an area where there were far more honey buzzards and nests. So we haven't got them here. And in some ways, if you're going to try and encourage honey buzzards to come here, you're encouraging another non-native species to come in. So there's a huge environmental argument there. And we don't know of any other predators. Obviously, the nests that die will be predated potentially by mice and other birds. That's something we try and prevent by taking the nest down to prevent any secondary kill from the pesticides we may have to use.
Yeah,
there are huge environmental issues involved in that sort of thing.
Is there an alternative to pesticides? Just out of interest.
Well, we started off the season using a process that we called natural removal. It involves having hoist access pretty much to the nest, going up, earlier on in the day, as a minimum anyway, wearing a sting-proof suit and clearing the branches around the nest. So you need good hoist access anyway to that area. The idea is to leave the nest on a single branch. You withdraw, let the nest settle down. They seem to settle down quite quickly, actually. And then you go back in the evening at dusk when the majority of hornets are back home. And the idea is you slip we use a medical grade plastic bag over the nest in one smooth movement, cable tie it to the branch, cut the branch, bring the nest down, and then we've been using carbon dioxide cylinder with a sort of lance on the end. We often sort of slide it down into the bag through underneath the cable tie, something like that, and fill the bag with CO2, and that anesthetizes the nest. Just calms it down. It's a little disconcerting having the sort of nest in a plastic bag full of angry buzzing insects. The bag is then double bagged up, and then the nest was we've been killing them by putting them in the freezer for 24 hours. So the process works quite well, provided everyone's wearing the right protective equipment. It is the risks are manageable. It works very well, but you must have that hoist access to the nest. Since the end of August, a good number of the nests that we've discovered have had no hoist access whatsoever. And so we've had to employ tree surgeons to climb trees to get closer to them. And we've been using a pesticide to deal with the nests as well, because you just couldn't do the natural removal. But we're working on techniques all the time and trying to come up with new ideas that are safer, better for the environment, and talking to other people about how they they deal with nests. Unfortunately, in most areas, France, as I understand it, the nests are just dealt with pesticide, and they're not even taken down. They're just left in situ.
Right, another question.
Shout out here for anyone who has good ideas about non-toxic ways of killing off the contents of a nest, so that a nest could be left in situ, but have all the adults killed off overnight. If we could use something that's carbon dioxide based or water based or steam, I don't know, something like that, that would be great. It would be great not to have to be using pesticides and insecticides out in the environment.
I think there's a case for actually removing the nest in any case, because there have been reports that mated queens have overwintered in those nests. So that is an issue.
Yeah.
And we have had instances where the nests have been treated with pesticide, where when we've got them down, we've actually found living insects, living larvae. Still,
the larvae seem particularly robust, actually. The last nest that I dissected, we had to be careful, because although the nest had been treated with pesticide, there were plenty of hornets that would have emerged within the next sort of 24 hours or something in the sort of pupal phase, and obviously hadn't been touched by the pesticide. So I think if the nest had been left, they would have emerged, come into contact with a pesticide. But at that stage, we had the nest open, and we're dissecting it, and we're dealing with a few hornets that were just about to come out. So we had to keep our eyes open on those ones and deal with them as they emerged. So not without the risks. I would say, actually, in any nest removal process, whether you're using a pesticide lance or certainly natural removal, there is a risk of, I suppose we'd use the terminology, fizzing up the nest. We have had a couple of situations this year where there's evidence that hornets have been dispersed from the nest. Now, whether the queen's gone with them, don't strictly know that one, but the hornets have left the nest, and if the nest is then removed, they've got nowhere to go, and they seem to congregate and form what is sometimes called satellite nests or tertiary nests. and we've had to take at least one of those down. And in fact, one of them actually had eggs in. So whether that means there was a queen with it, I don't think we know that one, John, do we? Or whether it was a laying worker, we don't know the answer to that one at the moment.
That section of comb that I recovered at that nest with the eggs in, which was quite surprising to me when I looked closely. That's still awaiting examination by somebody to see if we could work out whether those eggs are viable or not. That's one thing we haven't got that far yet.
Yeah.
Lovely. Another question then. What is it that makes the Asian hornet so much worse for honeybees than the European hornet? And is there a difference?
Pass this one to a bug specialist.
Certainly in Jersey, until we started tapping for the Asian hornet, I don't think many of us had seen any European hornets.
No.
We know they were here, but they were very, very rare.
Yeah.
And it's only, and in fact, I went to our local biodiversity centre, and the young lady told me last year that they'd only had 3 reports of European hornets in Jersey in the last 100 years. To which I replied that, well, I've videoed a nest of them, and I've also released about another 5 or 6 of them myself last year alone. So they are there in the environment. The difference is that they are there; they're a constant. They're mainly out in the woodlands, although I have caught them inside in town parks here in Jersey. Surprisingly, right in the centre of our town. The difference is that the Asian hornet, the numbers can increase so incredibly year on year. That's the big difference, I think, personally.
Yeah.
In the UK, we have a lot of native hornets, especially I guess the further south you are in the UK, the more native European hornets you have. Talking to beekeepers, there's a lot of different experience that people have. Some people never see hornets attacking any of their beehives. Sometimes you might find occasional dead native hornet in front of the beehive, and other people are quite unfortunate in having a sustained attack by a local native hornet population on a hive, and that can be quite vicious, really. They will hawk and pick off bees, but when you talk to a lot of beekeepers, not many people experience that particularly bad predation by our native hornets. So I guess they just haven't developed in that way where they choose beehives as a preferable source of protein. They're very, very similar insects. They're similar in what they predate, apart from not concentrating so much on bees. So they're taking other pollinators. Again, they're having to feed their larvae on meat from caterpillars, flies, wasps, other social hymenoptera. But yeah, for some reason, it's a different behaviour that you get between the two species.
I've observed both, and the European hornet just doesn't have the skills. They seem almost quite bumbling in their attempts to take honeybees. When I observed Asian hornets, they're just so good at it. They seem so much better at it.
They're certainly after protein. We've had confirmed reports of them feeding off dead birds, and also feeding on the strand line on the beach where they're taking dead fish, and so they're really looking for protein.
I suppose identification is key as well, then, isn't it? Because you wouldn't want to identify in European hornets as Asian hornets to the detriment of native species. So
that's the difference between the two. We've had the European hornet since about 1750, and it was reported back in 1755 that it was very prolific along the southern counties of England, and we actually exported the European hornet to New York, Manhattan Island in 1840, and it's done very, very well there. It's gone right the way through Georgia and down south into Florida. It's got up to Canada, and it's going west through the Dakotas at the moment. So it's been doing very, very well.
Right. So another question. Sorry for all these. Hornet and wasp traps underneath beehives. There's one known as the Appy Shield. do any of the panel use this kind of thing for monitoring, trapping, that sort of thing? What are your tips for monitoring and trapping of Asian hornet?
We in Jersey, our Beekeepers Association, purchased a good number of them and handed them out. Was that last year, John? 2017, or was that? No, it must have been 2016, actually.
2017.
They're very good at catching your own bees, but I didn't think they were particularly good at catching hornets. Yeah, so there are more conventional traps, that you can see more easily. I think are more valuable. Door-based ones.
Yeah, I can add to that. As the AP Shield draw, I bought 2 in 2014, and I had them under my beehives for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I've never caught a hornet in them. I've had hornets at my hives for the last 3 years. They are, in my experience, they are exceptionally good at catching wasps. I've only had a few of bees. That what Alistair alludes to is that when you first put them underneath your hive, they come with it's a removable wire drawer, and the access entrance is on the side of the hive through cone escapes. But you have to, when you first put the drawer in place, you must leave those closed. They come with 2 little slats. You leave those closed. Your bees get used to them, and then after in the instructions, it's 10 days. Well, I found that you had to do it for basically a month. And then after a month, took those slots out, opened up those cone escapes, and after that, I had none of my bees in there at all. But I feel that I had 2 of the pre-production models that are really well made. Unfortunately, the 30 that were supplied to the Beekeeper Association by our local government were pretty poorly manufactured, and most of the ones that were issued out came back as they'd collapsed under the weight of the hive. And so they've gone back into storage. And to say, we've never had an experience of anybody actually catching a hornet in them. Most of the people here have used what Jerry just showed us, which is the Vita Pharma trap as supplied through Thorns, etc., which is what we all started with. I say we're moving more towards the open traps. We still use these traps, but we don't. There's a way you've got to use them correctly by putting the lids in the right place. But in fact, now we use them a lot as open traps, just as an indication there are hornets in the area, and we actually take the top and leave the top off. There are other traps being available. We found those to be, although they may seem expensive, we tried making the homemade ones as I've seen on the internet. We found them very fiddly, and we didn't find them as effective as those. Whether it's the yellow of the plastic that attracts the hornets, we're not sure, but they seem to work exceptionally well for us.
They're quite cheap as well. Yeah, they're quite cheap. And also in the springtime, I burnt 6mm holes in the side of the trap using a blowtorch and a 6mm drill bit, and the point of that is to allow bycatch to be released. And I've seen queen wasps crawl out of those holes in the side of those thorns traps. So I've got a selection of traps to use in the springtime, and then ones without the holes from about sort of May onwards, I suppose. They're cheap and easy to use.
This trap here. If you see in the bottom part here, that's the attractant, and it's attractant Frilon, which is hornet attractant. It's French, and this was put out on our day of hornets monitoring, and it was put out for 2 hours. Now, what you can see in the bottom there are not wasps or hornets; they're honeybees. So it's a cautionary tale here that this particular attractant is attractive to honeybees and not a single wasp in it. And that was over a period of 2 hours, about 20 to 25 bees. And I think it's important to note also that if we start to attract to bait stations, that if we do use these traps, that we make sure that they're not killing traps. We don't want to kill them, we want to monitor them. So it's essential that we use something like a bait station, similar to what Bunk created here. Can you see that? In fact, I'll show you a photograph of one. That's one that Bob Tompkins put out at Tim Defoe's house. And this is a close-up of it. That is far better to get the Asian hornets attracted to the bait station.
Yeah. We get asked about the attractants quite a lot. The attractant that we have generally settled on in Jersey is marketed as Trap-It by a company called AgriSense. There is an attractant that comes with the thorns traps, and our experience is that attractant is not as good as Trap-It. Trap-It is quite expensive, but it's effective and it's convenient to use. Comes in 5-litre containers and everything else. John, I think, has tried what he called the French mix, which I think is a mixture of, what is it, John?
I tried, well, one of the many French mixes, excuse me, which was 3 parts of a hoppy beer, 3 parts of cheap white wine, and some cassis, and I put some cappings in there as well. I found that almost as effective, but I have to say, I have to agree that the Satira or Trap-It, it's the same product, is the most effective. And more recently, once you've got the Hornets attracted to it, it is expensive.
You can dilute it down a bit.
You can dilute it down, so it's being used diluted down. And I would just say, in relation to what Jerry said about trapping at hives, I've most of the time got 4 or 5 traps around my beehives, around my apiary, and I've never, in 4 years, caught a honeybee in any of my traps.
No.
And most of the days I go out and check them and release all the bycatch. And I too have got holes at the top, and also over the top of where the liquid attractant is in the bottom, I've got a plate so that anything that goes into the trap doesn't get drowned in the liquid. It's quite happily to fly around, and I can release them. And we're very conscious of bycatch, and we only want to catch Asian hornets. We don't want to kill. We don't want to be part of the Asian hornet problem by killing other pollinators, because you do get moths and things like that. I personally have a huge wasp problem in my garden. I had 4 wasp nests in my garden 2 years ago, and I lost a hive to wasps last year, probably because I was off chasing hornets. So I do get a lot of wasp catch. But say I've never had the alcohol in the French mix deters honeybees. I've also recently experimented with another product, which is a shrimp paste. It's a carp fishing bait, which absolutely stinks because they like shrimps. I haven't found that very effective so far, but I've actually got a trap with Satira and a trap with this carp bait liquid in next to each other, and it just seemed to catch flies, and the hornets all go for the Satira. So that's the one. It does seem expensive, but it is, it's going to work.
Well, I think we've got time for one last question. This one's from Wendy from Beecraft. She couldn't make it tonight, but she wanted to ask this. So the sightings at this time of year in the UK, are they likely to be queens that would overwinter? Who'd like to answer that one?
I'd say we're not sure. It's difficult to know exactly when queens start appearing. So it's great to have information from Jersey, because that's like almost a stepping stone in terms of climate between France and the UK. And I think last year queens were appearing in late September. Is that right?
About now. I mean, we have had a change. We've had a conversation in the group only the last couple of days that we are starting. Even our own people that you well know were remarking on how big some of the hornets were. So we've actually decided today to try and remove the largest hornets in the expectation they may be queens. And I think, as Alice said earlier on, that we're going to try and examine them to see if they are. Bob Hogg, who most of you know, in some nest dissections more than 3 weeks ago, was finding males.
Yeah, we didn't see anything that we even thought were going to turn into queens, actually, but we do have another nest that was taken out more recently to dissect. So it'll be interesting to see what we find in that. But yeah, we just recently warned our trackers that if they are catching particularly large hornets, that they consider whether they might be queens, and actually, if they have a choice, particularly, they don't use them for tracking. They concentrate on using the smaller hornets for tracking, which are definitely workers.
Lovely.
So The worry for us at the moment with the Christchurch Hornet is that we don't know yet whether that's a queen or not. If it is a queen and it's emerged from a nest, then we could have a serious problem starting in that area for next year.
Yeah.
We were talking a little bit earlier about how difficult it is to identify queens. There's the queen that builds the nest in the spring that goes right the way through the year is sometimes known as the mother queen, and then she will start producing the sexuals in the autumn. So first of all, she'll lay eggs which will become males, and then she'll start producing eggs which will become the queens of the following year, sometimes known as gynes. So there's a period of around sort of 10 days, 2 weeks between the males being produced and the females being produced. And yes, it's those gynes that everyone's really worried about, because once they emerge out of the nest, and you can get, I think an average amount was around 300 gynes from a French nest. So you can imagine each of those gynes, there's a possibility of her founding a new colony in the following year. Although there are going to be losses over winter during hibernation. So the gynes will emerge. The males will have kind of matured over that sort of 10 days, 14 days. There'll be mating going on, and then the fertilized queens, the new queens, the gynes that are going to form colonies next year, will then hibernate, people think fairly close to the nest that they came from. And then the following spring, when they wake up, they'll migrate before they settle and make a new colony themselves.
One of the things we have noticed this year, and started from very early on, that the first two clusters of spring queens that we found were on our extreme northwest corner of the island and the extreme southwest corner of the island, well away from where we'd had them before. And there were two clusters of about 5 queens in each. And we found that in relation to nest numbers as well, that the nests, we took out 3 nests in one night, all within 100 meters of each other. And some of the team are still looking for another nest down there. So what we seem to be appearing is that if there was a queen there, or there were queens there, that they clustered together. And gone are the days when we were told 3 years ago that they don't nest more than closer than 250 meters apart. We're getting them nesting just meters apart. So things keep changing all the time, and that's why we need to keep our methodology moving all the time, and trying to learn as much as we can. And anything we can do down here to help you guys in the UK, you've obviously got something already, and we've got all the hornets we need here. We're trying to find as many as we can to take them out of circulation, and that's what it's all about, trying to be as environmentally friendly as we can be, but be effective as well. And that's what we are trying to achieve.
Before we run out of time, could I just emphasize how important it is for us and all beekeepers out there to get the general public on board, to educate the general public on what to look for, how to identify an Asian hornet, how to tell them apart from the European hornet and other insects of similar kinds,
and how to report them.
Exactly. And
how clear lines of communication.
Yeah. I don't know if you can see that. We have various bits and pieces that the Devon beekeepers have produced, which we can happily send to any other branches or associations throughout the country or wherever, should they require them or they haven't produced them themselves.
No, that's brilliant. Does anyone have any top tips for 2019, 2020 going forward in terms of what people should learn and look out for? You said identify
the public. That's a priority. We need the public behind us fully. We need them as our eyes and our ears in respect, if they hear something, to forward it on. And we need to do that.
I'd agree entirely with what Simon and Jerry have said. But my personal feeling, and we're lucky in Jersey on this one, and John's been hugely responsible for driving it forward, is is that going local is the way to do it. I think we've all seen sort of tabloid reports of Hornets in the UK and how the story gets hijacked into something that's utterly sensationalist. So in order to get a realistic story out there, I think you've got to go local. And I've mentioned to many AHAT members who've been over to Jersey that they need to start sort of smoozing their local radio stations, attending farmers markets with some ID cards, make it into a bit of a game or something. Take out the editor of your local gazette or something like that, and local Facebook pages. Start local. That's where you'll get the message out most easily, I believe. Rather than trying to sort of hit it on a national level where there just seems a lot of confusion about who's responsible for it and some lack of control of the story you can get out there.
Personally, I mean, that's been my drive to get it out to the public. I've been speaking to old age pensioner groups, school groups, companies, any companies that would want to talk. We have the advantage here that we have lots of Hornets, and so if you can take a live Hornet with you in a jar in your pocket, that actually quite often seals the deal. But identification is key. Yes, what you can do, and all this can be done before the nest phase. We proved this year with our 69 queens before nests were found that there's a huge amount that we can do and that the public can do in reporting sightings of Hornets before they start looking for the nests. 3 years ago, we were told all you need to do is look in the tops of trees to find the nests. Yes, we're finding them there, but there's a huge amount of work that could be done, and a lot of Hornets can be taken out of the equation well before that stage. I mean, our first sighting this year was February, and regularly through March, April, and May, we were getting them flying into people's houses and getting reports, and people were reporting them, and knowing that they were reporting a Hornet. And they're quite resilient to try and kill as well, by the way. I went to one that had been hit with one of the battery-powered rackets, had been sprayed with fly spray, had been hit with a newspaper, and I still took it alive, and it lasted for about 2 weeks in a pot. And so it's a fantastic training aid. People seeing a live Hornet really does the job for me, and everybody needs to be engaged. It's not just a beekeeper or a government matter. We all need to be on the same page.
Our first Hornet this year was 6th of February, and it was a hibernating queen that was disturbed in Hessian sacking as they cleaned out an anchor stored down at the harbour here. So it gives us sort of an example of well, a bit like queen wasps. They turn up in your garden shed, crawl out of the folds of your curtains, and there's no reason to suppose that Hornets are any particularly different in that sort of way of hibernating. So it's really, as John says, early on in the season you can encourage people to be vigilant and improve their identification skills, and once they've seen a Hornet or think they've seen a Hornet, not being shy about reporting it through the right channels so that the report can be sort of dealt with effectively. Also, the other thing I'd add is over 75% of our reports come with a photograph, and that's far higher than I thought it would be. But boy, that has been helpful. Without a photograph, it's very difficult to be sure what you're dealing with, unless your reporter has very good powers of sort of description. But, a lot of the descriptions start with "it was very big," and I have no idea what that means really. So a photograph is priceless.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It's quite a large topic. We could talk about this for hours, actually, and there's loads of questions coming in. I'm sure we'll be running another event next September for Asian Hornet Week 2020 with maybe some more updates. So we'll invite you back then. But thank you very much. It's been very informative and lovely.
Thank you.
Bye from me.
Indeed. Yeah. Bye, everybody. Yeah. It's great.
Bye. See you in December, John.
Okay. Thank you.
I look forward to that pint of Mary Ann, Jerry.